So, recording progress. So, what I want to do is the following. I want to do what I said I'd do. And there's problems with hearing me or not hearing me, let me know, okay? I want to go through a good part of the Gemara. Someone's going to read it for us, and we're going to move it from there. Then I have reflections on the Gemara, and in terms of how that will be important. We'll see if my reflections are important. Reflections on the Gemara, your reflections on my reflections, will all genuflect in a genuine way. Anyway, we'll do that, and I think will make a difference in terms of how we go about things. So what I want to do right now is the bottom of Tzadi Chet and basically to part of Tzadi Tet, and then that's first half of shir. Second half of shir, Joel's going to take the tough tostos and do something good with it, I hope. After all, I gave him since yesterday to take a look at it. Okay, good. Yavni, you're going to start. Now, you can make reference to Rashi, but I'm only interested in Rashi in terms of pshat and not anything that Rashi adds. I should have some introduction, more than that. Okay, so you always heard from me, those of you who learned from me before, that rabbis are creating a system. And I think this is a system-obsessed Gemara, Hullin. And basically, I'll say it now, basically there's a heck of a lot of rules, kolam, in Hullin. And it's not just psak halacha, but it's like there are rules, and you got to follow the rules. But the rules conflict. We all know this about Gemara, but they conflict. And halachically, and our eyes are going to be halachic eyes. And so therefore, for all of us who spend a lot of time learning Gemara, I got two particular shades to it. In other words, I'm looking more at halacha. We're all going to look more at halacha, and we're going to see kolam, and we'll see what happens to the rules, what happens to the kolam, right? Okay, so we're going to read through the Gemara for a few minutes, and we'll take our time, but a few minutes, and then I'm going to reflect on the progress of this discussion on kolam. And you're going to tell me where I'm right and where I'm wrong, and that's fine. And we're not, while it sounds like psak halacha, you'll see, I think you'll end up may agree with me. Of course it's about halacha, of course it's psak halacha, but they give you the rules to work with, giving us the rules to work with. What I'm talking about. We're inside when they're developing the system. These are the conversations of developing the system. That's too cute, but I'll use that when I give a outside shir next week. The system, what did I say? I said something cute. It wasn't completely real, but it was cute. I'll remember that, and I'll use it next week in Czech Republic. But for us, and sorry for being cute, we are going to see those rules. Okay, and then we'll see how Tosfot tries to deal with it, because that's the one really good example. So Yavne, on the bottom of Tzadi Chet, we're all together on the bottom of Tzadi Chet in the Vilna Shas. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines. I'm a Rabbi Chia. Okay.
Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Amar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, Mishum bar Kapara, Kol Isurim.
Stop there. Chia bar Abba, what generation is he?
Third.
Okay, I'll take
Maybe.
that. In what country?
I think he moved from Bavel to Eretz Israel, but
okay, good. So Eretz Israel, what kind is Eretz Israel? I think he's a Mora. Okay, go ahead. And Yeshua ben Levi is what?
Around around a little before, around the same time.
Well, definitely before him. Very good. So I think we normally say first generation. Okay. When I'm wrong, somebody tell me. Okay. Bar Kapara was who?
Even earlier.
Yeah, earlier. Tana Mora, right? That kind of swing.
Right.
If I can make more out of that, right? Things are getting more solidified, whatever. So we hear that's the yichus right now of this statement. Go on.
Kol isurin shebatorah b'shishim.
What do you make of the word kol yisurim?
What do you mean? What do I make of it?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
all the forbidden things.
Okay. Anything that's forbidden. Okay. Kol yisurim. I would put the emphasis there on the call. Call. Okay, good. The samach. Okay, go on.
Sorry. אמר לפניו רבי שמואל בר יצחק, רבי.
What generation?
Third or fourth?
Third, I think third, maybe. Okay. He's in Amara too, right?
Yep. רבי, אתה אומר כן, אחי, אמר רב אסי,
Who's Rav Asi? What generation?
Also third?
I think so.
Maybe.
So maybe that's what you said, fourth. Okay, fine. Amar
רב אסי, אמר רב יהושע בן לוי, משום בר כפרה, כל איסורין שבתורה ב100.
Okay, so that's the yichus, right?
Right. It's the same. They're citing the same, okay, exactly the same chain of yichus. It's only like the previous person who right. Rabbi Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak heard from both Rav Asi and from Rabbi Chia bar Abba a similar statement from the same chain of tradition, but with a different number.
Okay.
Either
right.
all of the forbidden things in the Torah are in 60, or all of them are in 100.
What sounds tougher to you, 60 or 100? I'm just curious.
In 100 is tougher.
Okay, fine. Okay, we'll see. Ushnehem
לא לימדוה אלא מזרוע בשלה. דכתיב ולקח הכהן את הזרוע בשלה וגומר. So both of them learned it from the same concept or the same source. Didn't learn it from anything other than
assume half your chaverim didn't really prepare well. So it's the context.
So should I explain how the learning is?
Yeah. Quickly,
so they're both learning it from the cooked forelimb, right? And because the context is, I believe it's like the Pesach sacrifice that it's what is it? It's some offering that the forelimb is for the Kohen and the rest of the animal is for the regular for people.
Right. This is the what kind of korban is it?
I don't remember. I'm sorry.
Shlamim. Okay. Right. Okay, but the Kohen gets the Zorah B'Shem, right?
Right. The Kohen and so so as we're going to see, they're cooked together potentially, in which case you can ask how are the people getting to eat?
Well, what's the problem?
The problem is that there's mixture when they're cooked together. So the people who are not allowed to eat the zroa are eating something people? That was cooked with the zroa.
Who are those people?
Non-Kohanim.
Which is everybody eating the shlamim, probably.
Right.
But the Zorah B'Shela goes to the Kohen, right? So it's also to the Zah. It's not going to be cooked together, right?
Right.
Because then you have that problem. Right? But we're talking about learning 60 or 100, that
Right.
might have something to do with ratio. I'm talking about ratios here, right? Okay,
Right.
got it. The Tanya.
ותניא, בשלה, אין בשלה אלא שלמה. רבי שמעון בר יוחאי אומר, אין בשלה אלא שנתבשלה עם העיל.
Give me the first part.
So, and so we have a braita that says the word in the pasuk, zoa b'shela, and b'shela implies that it is whole, whereas Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai has a different opinion that he says b'shela implies that it has been cooked with the rest of the animal.
Okay, you have any scores on that?
On that understanding of the word b'shela.
Yeah.
Let me look at the whole pasuk.
Listen, I'm not trying to drive you all crazy by asking these little questions and doing these things right now. I mean, I'm doing it so that we can process a little bit as we learn. If you just read it, then the processing is not there. I'm reflecting on pedagogy right now. Okay, Jacob, you had an idea there? I saw your hands.
Well, we could ask maybe for bishela, is it like roasting in fire? Is it boiling?
And therefore, the word bishela, the word?
I guess was that it might have had more to do with the whole pasuk is v'lakacha kohen et hazroa b'shela min ha'ayil and so on. And so I thought maybe it had to do with the fact that it's saying you take the cooked zoa from the ayil. That implies that maybe like it was cooked first and then taken away.
Okay.
But I thought they might have been going off of in the pasuk. But
anybody else? Either one, Joel.
I think Rashi and Tosfot kind of play this out, right? A little bit.
Okay,
right?
so just read the Tosfos.
The Tosfot, right, is in b'shela ela shlema. It's the top of Tzadi Chet Amud Bet. Piresh bekontros. The little neat paresh be'ezel lashon, right? So Rashi says, well, it's not explained what language is b'shela. How do you get from b'shela to shlema? In other words, Rashi's confused. V'nir elefaresh the mashma b'shela kmo b'shel la, right? So now the Tosfot has the drash here that it's of it, right? Lamed digusha umapike, right? So if you have the lamed, it's its own word, or it's a double lamed in b'shela, and then the hay has a mapik in it to make it like shela. Kamoshi yesh la kilomar kamoshihi, right? So therefore, implying as it is. So it has to be cooked as a whole animal. And
right. So I saw a recipe for a chicken something roasted in its own. Sounds like Tosos Shita. Okay, that's Tosos. Okay, very good. Okay, good. Okay, fine. And what about the regards the second part of that drasha, or the second drasha? That's b'shela shlema. What about shenispashla im ha'ayil? Read the pasuk. Yeah, where's the pasuk derived? What's this pasuk?
Bamidbar vav yudtet.
Yeah, read that. Read the pasuk.
ולקח הכהן את הזרוע בשלה מן העיל וחלט מצה אחת מן הסל ורקיק מצה אחד ונתן על כפי הנזיר אחר התגלחו את נזרו.
All right, so somebody shouldn't say that's just pshat here. That's all. The pasuk says is that you cook it together. Okay, good. Okay, spend too much time. Okay, go on to Kuli Alma.
דכולי עלמא בהדי איל מבשל לה. מר סבר מחתך לה והדר מבשל לה, ומר סבר מבשל לה והדר מחתך לה. So everyone agrees that it's cooked.
Everyone agrees the first shita, right? That they're giving. There are shita they're giving here. I'm sorry.
Right.
I call it first shita. There you have a shita. Go ahead.
Right. First shita is that everyone first understanding of this baraita is that everyone agrees that the zroa is cooked with the ayil, and one opinion is that you cut it off and then you cook them together, and the other opinion is that you cook them together and then you cut it off.
Okay, fine. Well, the Ibai Sema, right?
The Ibai Tema, the Chulei Alma, Mechatechla, Vehadar Mevashela, Mihu, Mar Savar, Behadi Ail Mevashela, Umar Savar, Bekdera Acheret Mevashela. Or another understanding is that everyone agrees that first you cut it off and then you cook it, whereas one opinion in the Braita is that you cook it together with the aisle, and the other, presumably that's Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's opinion, and the other opinion is that that you cook it in a separate pot. Maybe not.
Okay, so Tosfos says something else on that, but that's fine. Okay, so fine. You put in another pot to cook. Now they say what? Lelish nakama. Now, before you go any further, just the first couple of words of Rashi. Lelish nakama, Rashi is like 5 lines down, 6 lines down, right? Lelish nakama.
Yeah, should I read it?
Yeah.
V'ashtaka mesayem למלטי דאמרן, למילטי דאמרן לאל, ושניהם לא לימדוה. ללישנא קמא,
no, ושניהם לא למדוה, אלא, right, מזרוע בשלה. זרוע בשלה is the source of this. Now he's going to, basically what Rashi just is saying is now they're going to put it together.
Right.
Put it together that what? The Zerah B'Shela is the source of the halacha of what? Of 60 or 100.
60 or 100.
Right? Okay. Even though we don't know it completely, it's the source. Okay, so now go back to the Gemara.
Lishna kama aliba de divrei hakol, lishna batra aliba de Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. Meaning either we say like because everyone says this, or we still have, or regardless, or we
there's
just
two
have to
shitas,
explain.
Right? The two shitas.
Right.
One shita says what?
That everyone agrees that
fully alma. Everyone agrees that what?
That the zroa is cooked with the rest of the aisle, and one shita is that.
Wait. So that's the important part. Everyone agrees that it's cooked together. When it's cooked together, what happens?
It's cooked together. What happens? There's mixing.
You have the but before you get there, you have the problem.
Right.
Is there now, right?
Right.
Is there now what? What problem?
Is there now a problem to eat the rest of the aisle because it's been cooked with the zoa, which is only for the
right. So therefore the answer would be but we have a ratio. We have ratios, and the ratios will work so that there will be beetle.
Right.
And the second shita.
And according to the second shita, we still have the exact same problem, only according to Rabbi Shimon.
Has a place. Lishna batra.
What's that?
Right. Go ahead.
Lishna batra aliba. Lelishna batra aliba de Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. Meaning, we still in the second shita, we still have one opinion of a Tana who says that they're cooked together. In which case, we still have to explain his opinion how it makes sense.
Wait. There's one opinion that says cooked together. Therefore, we have a problem.
Right.
And therefore, we have an answer, which is 60 or 100.
Which is the ratio. Yeah.
The other shita says what? They're cooked?
They're cooked together. Oh, the other, what do you mean? Yeah.
Within the
within the second.
We're doing the Ibayasema, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
With Batra.
Right.
One holds that, unless I misunderstood you, one holds that it's cooked together, and the other one holds
that it's cooked.
Marma, right? The other one holds that it's cooked
separately. Right.
When it's cooked separate, do you have a problem?
No.
You have no problem.
Right.
But then again, you have no halacha. I mean, you don't have halacha is getting derived out of a problem.
Right.
The problem is when they're cooked together. There's no problem when they're not cooked together. That's a nice solution in terms of the metzias of that situation, but it doesn't give us a derivation of halacha.
Right.
But here, according to the Gemara, is the Gemara happy enough? The Gemara seems to be happy enough. We have the Lishna Kama, which according to both, they're cooked together. And we have the Lishna Basra, that we have one big rabbi who says that they are cooked together, even though the other Shita, the Tanna Kama, evidently says they're not They're not cooked together. We have enough there to cause the problem, and the problem of Easter being cooked with heter, and we now have, what's the Easter? The Easter is the zroa b'shela, which is mutter only for a kohen, and is also for a zar. Who's a zar? Anybody eating shlamim, right? The zar is everybody else but a kohen. And when we have the problem, we have an answer, and that's why the Gemara in the beginning said what? Everyone agree, and they all agree at the beginning. They all agree that it's derived from this halacha, and so we have 3/4. That's sufficient for us.
Because even if we don't hold by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, we know he's not going to lead us. Like he's not going to lead us to do that. No, even maybe we do, maybe we don't. But even if we can't say we hold by the Tanna Kama, we still have the problem of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai wouldn't have told us to do something. So obviously wrong.
What do we have left to explain? We now know the source of 60 and 100.
The difference between the 60
we know
and
that
100.
60 and 100 gives us the halacha beetle, right? We know that but we don't understand is what?
The difference between the 60 and the 100.
Do
other people want to answer questions?
Mandamar, that's good. Good, you read. Mandamar.
Mandamar b'shishim savar basar v'atzamot bahade basar v'atzamot misharinan v'havale b'shishim.
Okay, stop there.
Yeah. So
the guy who says 60 said you can say what?
The guy who says 60 reasons that we count the meat, we count both the meat and the bones together when we are measuring the ratio. And
what's the salient feature of the foreleg of the aisle?
It has more than average. It has a higher than average bone to meat ratio.
It's bony. Okay. Basar batzamos.
Should I keep going?
Come on, you're on a roll.
Sorry, should I keep going? Mandamar b'mea savar basar.
No, yeah, wait a second. Mandamar b'shishim savar was the summos by the basar batzamos. Rasha with the havalei b'tzeikin. Mandamar b'mea, right? Go ahead.
Savar.
Keep on reading.
Basar b'hedi basar v'sharinan v'havalei b'mea. Whereas the person who thought of mea, reason that the ratio is the meat to the meat ratio. So the meat of the isur to the meat of the heter, and then the meat of the zroa to the meat of the rest of the aisle, and then.
And why would you count bones?
Because they don't give much flavor, or because.
Okay, fine. That would be the answer. Or maybe no flavor at all. So that could be discussed a lot, but that's sufficient. You have one more section to do. Umi alfina. What does that mean? Mi alfina mina?
How can we learn from this?
In other words, what's the real question here?
I think how can we learn from this particular case to other things?
Yeah, right. It's just paradigmatic.
Right.
Umi alfina, the chi morin. Do we then learn out of this? And we have this case, we have the 60 and 100. 100 may have surprised you. None of you were surprised by 60. You all know that kind of general deal. And so, but how far does it go? Tanya, can we really learn out from this? Go ahead.
Tanya, zeu heter haba michlal isur. Sorry, I'm going to read a little more.
No. This is it. Okay. I'm going to stop you here because I think I did enough to you. Anybody want to help me out now? Yes, Shkaya. Thank you for taking the initial blow. Okay. Lexi, read from. Did you look at it?
you v'hatanya zahu heter haba michlal isur. Zahu lemute mai lav lemute kol isurin shebetorah.
Stop there. Okay.
Right. So building on this challenge of can we learn from the case of the Zerah B'Shelah, it quotes this Baraita that in speaking about the Zerah B'Shelah says this is a permitted thing that comes from the larger category of forbidden things.
I'm going to challenge you on the word haba. What do you think it comes from? When we translate it differently?
Like not comes from, but like leaves the general rule?
Yes, yeah. Shemesh ba, right? The semes is yotzei, right? So sometimes ba means leave, just like that. So that would be it. So Kali, you got it exactly right. Okay, good. I'm sorry for interrupting. Okay. So that's it. Continue with the explanation.
So the Baraita is just the zehu, that quote, and then the Gemara says, what is the zehu there? What is that specifying? What is that limiting? What is it excluding? Isn't that including every other case of Yisurim? That this is like the only case where you can have heter and isur cooked together and eat the heter. So like seemingly this would be a chiddush that you couldn't extrapolate from to any other cases if that's what the zehu is limiting.
So okay, good. I'm going to stop and ask you one question. What is that? I'm going to come back to it. No. I want to continue the flow. But zehu heter abad mechlal isur. This heter is yotze from the klal of isur. And how far is that klal of isur? You said everything that is. Say it again. What's the klal isur?
Right, that like, well, it's not about the klal isur, it's about the zehu, right? It's that like, this is the thing that like leaves the category of isur, right? This, the Zerah B'Shelah, and more accurately, the rest of the aisle with the Zerah B'Shelah is the thing that like leaves that. Everything else would not be able to like leave the category of isur.
So you're right, I agree. And therefore that's with zehu, right? You would emphasize zehu. However, I still want to say something about klal isur. What's in klal isur? What's contained in that category of isur?
Presumably anything that's
also
can't consume, like anything, like in this case, we're talking about anything that can't be consumed.
Well, I don't know. It just says, it just says klal isur. So I was right now on the face of it. I want to say all isur. Any sort of isur gizai that you can't shear, any isur that's out there that pertains to that, any isur is that you say that's it. The only one that's not there is Zerah B'Shelah. Let me say the following: none of you were thinking about Zerah B'Shelah 2 weeks ago. It turns out that Zerah B'Shelah is the magic, what's that, Monopoly, get out of prison card or whatever that was, or it's the magic key. Zerah B'Shelah is the only situation in which we say you can leave because the pasuk seemingly gives it to us that the Zerah B'Shelah, that's it. It gives it to us. Zerah B'Shelah has beetle. And what about everything else? Does it have beetle? I'm saying the same thing, but okay, Lexi, it's very disconcerting when you're agreeing with me. You're like nodding, but of course what it means it doesn't have, right?
Ooh,
it doesn't,
wait.
Right, exactly. Okay,
sorry,
so it doesn't have.
Is it the idea is this why nothing else can be like bottled when...
Hang on.
So how useful is Zerah B'Shelah right now?
What? Oh, wait.
Okay, Kali. Yeah,
I want to say we don't necessarily have to say that nothing else is ever bitul because all of this is l'hatchila, right? Like it's like we take this lamb, like everything we've been talking about, in which there's bitul with the Zerah B'Shelah, implies that you can do bitul l'hatchila. So I don't feel like
I have a feeling
that has been proven either way.
Later.
Well,
later we're going to get there, but I feel like,
okay.
Am I supposed to read this pretending the division between Lahat Chila and B'diavad doesn't exist? Like,
I don't see B'diavad here.
Right, but it's still a principle that we know exists.
I don't know. I'm learning all my principles.
Maybe it doesn't.
Right,
I don't know.
No,
Maybe they've never heard of it.
I'm being different. I'm learning all the. I'm being different. I understand that. But I'm learning. No, but I'm saying to you, don't be too smart. Okay. Try to take a. I understand what you're saying. Just take it right now as it stands, and as it stands, it's a shocking statement. Okay.
But maybe it's only shocking to us because we know that things can be bittul.
Well, I don't know. Right now I'm hearing that there's nothing else that's being bittul. But having said that, that can lead us to our next. That was a straight man, and that could lead us to the next statement. Okay, so Lexi, give the next statement. And also, Lexi, I hate to ask you this, channel me in terms of the reading of the next line.
Amar Abaye.
Do a Purim parody of Rabbi Landes. Okay.
Amar Abaye, lo nitzracha ela l'Rebbe Yehuda. Da amar min b'mino lo batil, kamash malan da hacha batil.
Okay, good. So stop there.
Abaye gives answer.
What generation?
Yeah. Abaye is 4th generation Bavo, I think.
Babel Amora, right?
Yeah.
So getting later, right?
So Abaye says that the zehu, the limiting of the zehu, is only necessary according to the opinion of Rebbe Yehuda, who believes that, like.
By the way, who is he?
He is a Tana. I don't remember.
5. Yeah, I think usually 5. Yeah, it's a Talmud of Rebbe Kiva. Okay, right. Domar.
Rebbe Yehuda believes that mim b'mino eno batel, that like something cannot, like an isser cannot be batel in a thing of its own kind. Elsewhere we discuss what exactly that means. Ever, like that is not.
Give me an example, not from this case, of mim b'mino for everybody. What's the example of mim b'mino?
Truma flour and Hullin flour.
Okay, right. And only a Kohen can eat truma flour. And therefore, that's example. As the flour, they're both your regular white flour or whatever. Doesn't matter. Even a low bottle, right? You can have the same thing with liquids too. Wine that's truma wine and wine that's that. It's low bottle, and therefore what? What does the zehu do?
In general, for Rabbi Yehuda, min b'mino is not batel. And in this case, this roa b'shela is min b'mino because this roa is the same. It's a meat thing of the same. It's from the aisle. The rest of the aisle is the same type. It's the same mean as this roa. And here, this roa is batel. That for Rabbi Yehuda, this is the only case of min b'mino where it's batel. So that's what the zehu is limiting.
But when Abaye brings this, going back to Abaye who brings Rabbi Yehuda, when Abaye brings this, what's he doing to the case? He's moving it from Kol Isurim to a subset of Min B'mino. Before, when we had Kol Isurim, or the klal of Isur, right? And Kol Isurim, it meant nothing can become batel except for Zroa B'Shela. Now, Abaye says, hold on a moment. That is such my word now, punishing Isur. I'm throwing that word in. A punishing klal. There's such a punishing klal that that's the only thing in the whole world of Isurim that can be batel is this one. Let me take it to something that sounds more practical and more limited in its scope, much more limited in its scope. And that is,
Abaye expands
that's a strategy here.
Abaye is doing
min b'mino. Yeah.
I'm saying Abaye is doing an expansion, right? Like the Gemara initially was trying to reject the idea. Obviously, the Gemara is setting it up to be rejected, but the Gemara is initially trying to reject the idea that I could learn out from this at all to anything about bitul in any other case. And Abaye, by limiting this zehu, by limiting the limitation to Rabbi Yehuda, is re-expanding the application of this case, right? He's saying that for Rabbi Yehuda, this is teaching us that like we couldn't learn out from other cases of min b'mino about bitul from here. But that like, and again, I'm also influenced by Rashi, but I think the idea is expanding that like min b'she'eno mino, like can be batzal, and we could learn about that from here, that this is only the zehu, the way it's like, you know, exclusive, the way it's unique, is only in comparison to other min b'minos.
I don't buy it. I hear you.
But how, if you don't buy it, then how else is Abaye responding to the Gemara's kushya, right? Because the Gemara,
what Abaye, I think Abaye is being responsive. I hear you. Is being responsive to the zehu. Zehu heter haba michlal isur, and the isur originally, as posed by the Gemara, are kol isurim, right? That's why it says, right? Now, by quoting Rabbi Yehuda, we have a specific Isur in mind. And that specific Isur, which is understandable, right? The two flowers in your example is understandable. Only in this case do we say mean to me. Because why mean to me? Because one line hasn't been said yet. Because the Zroa B'Shela is flesh from an aisle, and the rest of the aisle is flesh from that same aisle. And in that case, we say that's the situation, and that's an exception, and don't apply it to any other category of Isurim.
No, but I think that's why Abaye is an expansion, because it's kind of confusing here, because the idea is that it's a double negation, right? And so the Gemara initially was trying to say, this zehu, this limitation is telling me that this like aisle is different from all other cases of Isurim, so I couldn't learn out from it to any other case. What is special about it? In what way is it different such that I couldn't extrapolate from it? Well, it's different than everything. And then Abaye is saying, no, it's only like unique vis-a-vis min b'mino cases. Right? He's responding to the umiya finamine, can we derive anything from it? Isn't this different than all other type of Isurim? And then he says, no, this is only different than we know Isurim, but you can learn out from this to other things. And that's also only for Rabbi Yehuda. For the Rabbanan, seemingly you could learn out from it to anything.
Maybe we just have trouble with the word. I'm going to take one more line, because then we're going to go and we'll see how it plays out. But I just want to ask you a question. Expansion of one line with no dangling participles, okay? It's an expansion of what? What Abaye does.
Abaye is expanding what you could learn, what other cases you could learn out from.
Okay, in terms of we're on the same. I don't disagree with you, but you're saying it differently than me. I'm talking about the Isur, you're talking about the paradigm. Right? You're talking about the paradigm?
Right, as in by saying
you're talking about the paradigm. Okay, I'm stopping. I'm just letting you know, see how it plays out. But I don't think we're in disagreement. I think if you're talking about expansion of the power of the paradigm, I agree with you. If you're talking about the restriction of what is usher, then I'm right. I know. That sounds right to me. We're going to move on from there. So therefore, Kramash Malan, as you just read before, the Hacha Batil. Now the Gemara asks the question. The following questions are to become part of a template of the rest of the examples, or the next example. It becomes a template, okay? Continue, let's see, Veligmar.
Veligmar mine, right? So our Gemara asks, like, if, even according to Abaye's answer, fine. We just said that according to this, Rabbi Yehuda believes that the Zroa B'Shela is the one instance in which Mim B'Mino is Batel, right? That it's an exception compared to all other cases of Mim B'Mino. But it's saying, okay, well, if we have this case that's clearly given in the Torah where Mim B'Mino is Batel, why doesn't Rabbi Yehuda learn from this case that that's the norm for Mim B'Mino, that all Mim B'Mino is like capable of Bitul, right? So
Ligmar, I would translate the Ligmar Minei is, I would translate it, however I would translate it, is why don't we teach from this? In other words, let the paradigm be our case of Zroa B'Shela.
Right. Why is it a chiddush instead of a paradigm?
Well, we don't use that word yet.
Okay, sorry. Why is it an exception instead of a paradigm?
Right. It should be a paradigm. That's really a strong question. So now the Gemara answers.
The Gemara says, Gali Rachmana, v'lekach mitam apar mi'adam ha'se'ir, tarvaihu b'hadei hadadei ninhu v'lo batle.
What's the case?
So this is when you're taking blood from a cow and from a goat, and
who's taking the dam?
The
Kohen Gadol, yeah.
The Kohen is taking these and like splattering them on the mizbeach, and it lists them, even though you're like this dam is being mixed together. It still calls it like dam hapar udam haseir, right? Implying that it like they maintain distinct names and identities.
Right, and as Rashi says, what's the Rashi say? Rashi says, no, I can forget it. Down below. Well, Kachli dam hapar, for those with the Vilna, is the first long line, wide line. Well, Kachli dam hapar, read Rashi, midam haseir.
באחרי מות, גבי קרנות מזבח הפנימי, וכסבר רבי יהודה שמראה דם שניהם לכלי אחד, והדבר ידוע שדם הפר מרובה מדם השעיר, וקרא לי דם השעיר, alma lo mevatele. Right, so...
So it's the dam ha'seir that retains its integrity, even though it's been vastly liquidated, one would think, by the dam hapar. Therefore, this becomes the classic case. It becomes the paradigm to tell us what?
That according to Rabbi Yehuda, that he learns from this that Mim B'Mino is not able to be batel.
It's not batel. If the dam seir is not pushed out by the dam hapar, and they both exist there within the pasuk, it means Mim B'Mino lo batel, because they're both blood. That's the mean. Don't say what's a different blood. No, they're both bloods. You can't really tell the difference between the bloods. Can't. And when we say nonetheless, they both exist and they both have that. So Mim B'Mino lo batel, that becomes the paradigm. And what happens with Zroa B'Shela? It remains, in your words from before, Lexi, it remains exception. An exception. Now the Gemara continues.
Right. So the Gemara asks,
continues hammering. Umay.
Yeah, we're in two psukim. We have the pasuk about the Zroa B'Shela, and we have this pasuk about the dam. And the Gemara asks, Umay chazi dekamina mehai, like mar mehai. So the Gemara says, okay, we have two psukim. So why it seems kind of arbitrary to say one of these is the paradigm and one of these is the exception? Like, what made Rabbi Yehuda turn the blood one into the general paradigm and the Zroa B'Shela into the exception to the rule?
But since he's arguing for Zroa B'Shela, just change the emphasis a tiny bit. It should be our pasuk.
Right, like you could have learned out the Zroa B'Shela as the norm, right, and blood could have been the exception. Why?
Right, as the paradigm. Right. Okay. Very good.
Right.
Okay. So the answer is
that it's a chiddush. There's something about it that is like exceptional, that is different than other normal cases, and we don't learn out we don't turn chidushim into paradigms.
So is this Isaac Kala? You still there? Where'd he go?
I'm right here.
Oh, there you are. Is this where you got your idea?
No. Honestly, I was just being too
No,
clever
you
for
don't
my
have
own
to be
good.
honest. Claim it because it's the same. It's really the idea. What's the chiddush in Zeroa B'Sheila? Zeroa B'Sheila is a lachatchila. According to the psukim, you're supposed to cook it. You're supposed to cook it according to 3/4 of the poskim, 3 out of the 4 poskim. You're supposed to cook it in the same pot together. It's not a b'diavad statement. Oh, you made a mistake. I cooked them together. What do I do? And b'diavad will accept it. No, it's a lachatchila. It's a lachatchila. That's how you have to do it. And what does that render Zeroa B'Sheila? Not just an exception, but such an exception that we give it a name, chidush. And a chidush is, I'll give it a term, sui generis. It's just, that's it. It's a chidush, it's sui generis and nothing else. Okay, so go on. And Gemara keeps on hammering. Go ahead, Ihache.
Right. So we just said that the reason Rabbi Yehuda makes this Zeroa B'Sheila his exception, not his paradigm, is because it's a chiddush. But then it says Ihache l'mei v'shishim nami lo ligmar. Okay, if it's such a chiddush that Rabbi Yehuda doesn't want to learn from it and turn it into his paradigm about me and Vimino, then why can we learn anything from it? Why can we still use our paradigm of shishim and mea?
In other words, using it somewhere else, right? That in some place we would use it, but don't use it. It's based on such a crazy exception. It's such a chiddush. It's a sui generis. It doesn't apply anywhere else. And then the Gemara says you're making a fundamental mistake. Go ahead, Lexi.
Atu anan l'kula gamrinan l'chumra gamrinan d'midoraita beruva batel. The Gemara is saying, you think we're like learning out of kula by talking about like Isser being shishim? Like, do you think that our assumption would otherwise have been that things are never batel? No, midoraita. It should be batel beruva in majority.
That should be. It already is.
It is midoraita. It is like batel and aruba, and we're learning out things will only be batel in like 60 or 100. Right. And so essentially what the Gemara is saying is that we don't learn out kulot from a chiddush, but it is possible to learn out a chumrah from a chiddush.
Yeah, but this is like really important.
Wait, I thought
they're saying here that the whole system here is really working on a Jeroboam level. This whole conversation right now in terms of the application of the 60 and 100. How can that be? Look at the Rashi. Ha-chumrahi. Okay. First of all, 2 Rashis. The first Rashi is chiddush. I should have said it earlier. I'm sorry. So from the wide lines in the Vilna, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines down. Chiddush who? What's the chiddush? The lachatchila hiter levatel ha'yisur. That lachatchila, they said, go ahead and do it. Cook this Zeroa B'Sheila with the rest of the aisle, and it will be batel. It's not a b'diavad. It's that. I mean, just Rashi says it a lot better than me. So I want it there. Okay. Now I want to go to the next one I want to, Atu Anan. So this goes into this whole Atu Anan. Pada gamrina mine mea oshishim kulahu. Are you saying that you can be mevatel only with 100 or only even more at 60? It's a kula. The tema chidushu the chadish rachminu va'akil gabe below gamrina mine. Are you saying it's a chiddush we can't use it? You're mistaking the nature of the 60 and 100, which is considered to be a d'Rabbanan move. Ha-chumrahu. Look at the Rashi. Delo tema libatel beruba. They were not saying, we're saying, don't say it's just automatically batel in a rove. What's a rove? 2 to 1. That's all a rove is. We didn't discuss that principle, but that's a major principle. that the Deraisa, there's a beetle of rope. And the whole notion of where things fit, if a klal refers to a Deraita Derabanan, is not finished here. And there'll be Rishonim who will disagree with it, but I'm following Rashi right now. The Chumra Shapir Gamrina Mine. Actually, we're learning a Chumra. The Kol Shekay, who Uma Ayil Nazir, or El Nazir, Ayil Nazir, the Akil Gabe, Lo, the Akil Gabe, Lo Akil, El B'mea O B'shishim. This whole thing of where can you get it, that you can get it to get it to Bato 600. Kol Shekay be Surei Achrini. Everybody can explain the Rashi to me. That's a hard Rashi. Yavni got the Rashi?
I can explain the Rashi, but I'm missing something in the overall reasoning. It's saying if we're learning from this that I think it's saying if we're learning from this that in this case, maybe someone else should explain the Rashi, and I have a question.
Okay. Joel, you got the Rashi?
I think so. I think he's saying that this is the case where the Torah was Mekil about the Zorah B'Shelah, right? And I think the idea here is that that's the most Mekil the Torah is willing to be, then we should never be more Mekil than that. And therefore that should become the standard for everything else. We should never be Makkah. And where does the fact that it's a Chumrah fit in? And therefore use that word. The chumrah. So when we are machmir on things, we should be machmir to be no more makil than we are about this Rav Shela, I think is the way to put it. So
right, that it's
okay, but say it again. Just say that again. Say it again.
Lexi, you want to translate for me? Is that
okay? Lexi, translate.
Just that like it allows for a kol shekain, right? That like he says that like this being a chumrah allows for this to be like a logical derivation where if the Zroa B'Shela, which as Joel said is like this very mekel case where we can be like lechatchila batel something, still it's only batel in this case of it being all cooked together and shishi. Then kol shila, kol shekain, they could only be batel in shishim or meya.
Okay, not bad. Okay, good. Okay, this we can review, but nonetheless, that's where it ends up. And what's the conclusion right now?
Wait, can I ask a question about the underlying
go ahead,
logic?
go ahead.
What's the how do we construct the earlier argument as a chumrah? I don't get it. Like we're saying that. Like the reason that the leg of the goat is the size it is relative to the rest of the goat is because that's the most we would allow to mix in. Is that like that's why God created goats the way God did, or like what's the? Because
So. I can't find the exact Rashi here. It goes on to
because like if we did think that like batel berov is fine, then like it's also batel berov.
Okay, so basically, because of this difficulty, there are Rishonim who say that. I was having trouble explaining it also, but other Rishonim say is that it's that 60 and 100 using to be the standard based on Zroa B'Shela is actually an asmachta. It's not a real derivation. I'm having a hard time explaining your question on the assumption, which it should be explained, but I'm not doing it right now. Or I can't do it right now. I don't have.
Look at the next Rashi. Look at
the next Rashi is big, but to do that,
short Rashi. Dimidoraita.
Yeah. Okay. Would you do it for us, Rabbi?
Yeah. So this he says midoraita. In other words, the normal reading of this midoraita would be that really the halacha is rov is enough, and this whole thing that we're doing is just a rabbinic law and a smachta. Rashi goes against that reading, and he says like this. He says, Klomar, Ilav mehai gamrinan. If we wouldn't have this, if we wouldn't learn from this, if we wouldn't have this learning, umishvinan bittul tam kishar bittul deiraita, then we would have no recourse but to equate all isurim with the general rule of rov. Right? Mashvinan bittul tam, we would consider bittul tam whenever there's tam kishar bittul deiraita beruba. Havel on the batle.
Beruba havel leftula, yeah.
Right. Havel diktiv achrei Rabbi Mata, because it says go like the majority. But once we do have this d'oraita learning, we now have a new way to understand it and say you need 60. In other words, Rashi is saying, he's not saying that mid'oraita is batil. He's saying klomar. No, read it differently. Klomar, it's mid'oraita, it would have been batel by the normal shitas, but now that we have this learning, we actually have a
this learning of what? This learning of
now that we have this learning of Zerah B'Shela, we actually know that in 60 you need to have 60, and it's a chumrah actually.
But the learning of Zorah B'Shela, the way we framed it was that there's a problem, that we have a mixture, and we have to get out of this problem by saying, oh, it's okay, there's a ratio that makes it okay. But if we say from the beginning
so
I'll give you
the answer there. Right, so I'll give you the answer. The answer is, no, that's a pilpul. The actual situation is that the pasuk, it says Zorah B'Shela, and you don't need a reason. You, with your mathematical mind, and you studied physics, you want a mathematical answer. And what that sheet is saying is no mathematical answers. That's only a drasha. That's an asmachta. But actually, it's just gezerat hakatu. It's just Torah telling us how it is. Now, they invest so much in 60 and 40. It's really hard to go away from it.
I don't know. I agree with Rav Danzig a little bit. It seems like it's saying, why is the Torah saying you're allowed to cook these together? It's because Midoraita has rove. But Chazal came in and had, saw, well, it's not just a rove. There's something more than just rove. There's 60 or 100. So midoraita, it's mutter because of rove.
Right. So, but what's this whole thing about chumrah?
And then, so Chazal institute, and the corner Rashi's reading, Chazal institute chumrah by saying the rove is not enough. Midoraita, it's enough. Right. But we're going to add that based on this case.
That's what I'm saying. Wait, that's not exactly what I'm saying. I'm saying.
I know it's not exactly what you're saying.
Wait, let her finish.
A little bit along those lines. But I thought that's what Rashi was saying.
Yeah,
okay, I think it's a good question you're asking.
Rabbi, short response, short.
Yeah. Rashi would have said, but we're learning a rabbinic chumrah. He doesn't say that. He says, we're learning a Torah chumrah. That's my point. He's imagining what the Torah law would have been had we not had this drasha, and he's saying, compared to that, this drasha is a chumrah, but that does not relegate this drasha to the status of the Rabbanan. It's still a deraita drasha. He's just comparing a theoretical Torah law with the actual Torah law, and that this.
Well, in order to do this, okay, I'm sorry. Okay, got it.
And that this drasha creates an actual Torah law which is more chumradik than the theoretical one we would have been left with had we been bereft of this drasha.
But
well, I think this also gets.
I just want to point out some words. Anan lekula gamrinan, lechumra gamrinan. In other words, it could very well be the way you said it, Rabbi. How you said it, Nachum. But they need to work it, right? We're working out a drasha, which goes back to your point about what they're doing. So it could be Duraita status, but they're really working it. And I just want to take it for what's here. They're confessing that they're working on a drasha. I want to say often we think that the complete traditional view is a drasha you just need to discover that what's there. Here, it's more like we're trying to create a drasha here. And therefore, I'm not negating what either two comments was said. I'm actually agreeing with that. Okay.
No, and just support for that is elsewhere. I mean, Rashi does require shishim as its own requirement, even in it's tam or shishim. So I think that would support that reading that this is doraita. So
a drasha doraita.
Yeah, I mean that shishim itself.
I'll say a drasha doraita.
Or whatever, mayor or shishim. So yeah.
What that does is to sufficiently, in terms of the system being created, it sufficiently negates this acharei rabim lahatot. Still exists, still there, it'll still be active. But in terms of its full potency, it's tremendously negated because you really need you need mea shishim. Let me do one more line. Rava Amar. So Rava says, I have a different answer. This whole thing is based, not that all Isurim are cannot be bottled, like what we said in the original statement. We thought all Isurim cannot be bottled except for Zerah B'Shelah. And then we had Rabbi Yehuda's Min B'Mino. And Rava says, Lo nitzurcha ela latam ki'ikar. Different halachic principle. A lot of clone here. That even when the forbidden substance is no longer present in the mixture, you took out the forbidden substance, whatever it is, but the tam of the forbidden substance remains. Ela tam ki'ikar. It says, nonetheless, that time is considered as if it's the substance itself. To the kachim usher, in the whole case of kachim, which we're super careful, I'm adding words, we're super careful, is usher. It should also be usher in Zroa B'Shelah, Kamashulan, the Hachashari, then this one case. And therefore, what does it do? It institutes the problem of, it's the problem, the principle of tam ke'ikar. And right now, as we're just reading it right now, tam ke'ikar, according to Rava, becomes a major principle, which has so far only one exception.
Well, no.
Tam ke'ikar becomes a major. What?
According to Rava, tam ke'ikar at least is not doraita in Hullin at all, right? According to Rava, tam ke'ikar applies to other kodshim and not this, which would imply the Rava thinks tam ke'ikar is not their midoraita for us.
Right. I have no problems with that. And then in the Rashi there, it says, I'll go down. The whole Rashi is very interesting, but it says about third line. And the Hakim one, because we have a principle, Me'achre Rabim Latos, Debatle Beruva, all right? It's a reoccurrence of that great principle. Ve'alfinu Me'hacha Lahachmir, Delo Ibata Ela B'Meya. And then we can go on from there. But I think actually, Joel, you're going to talk about this, Rashi?
I think we have to.
Okay, good. So we take a 5-minute break right now. Thank you, Yavni. Thank you, Alexi. Thank you for those who discussed. And take 5 minutes. We'll come back and you teach us this Rashi and do what you're going to do with the Tosfos. Get up and stretch, whatever. Yeah. I wouldn't have said what I said if it wasn't, I didn't know I was being recorded.
All right. Rav Landes will stop me, I'm sure, a whole bunch, but I'm gonna because I didn't prepare this like I was giving shir. So hopefully you're still giving shir, right, Rav Landes, and I'm just reading. Is that the deal?
No, you're giving share.
I'm giving shir. All right, here we go. So
no, excuse me. You're giving shot. Just give a shot here.
Okay, I'll give a shot. So just to remind us that Rav, right, we had a Braita, right, that said Zehu, I don't remember exactly the language, and I should. But it's Zehu heter haba michlal isur, right? That the Zerah B'Shela was a heter that emerges. It's the exception that proves the rule. Let's say maybe that's the way to put it, right? And Abaye answered that saying, no, that's only talking about min b'mino in the Rebbe Yehuda world. But Rava comes in and he says, no, what that Braita is talking about, that line from that Braita is talking about, is that generally tam ki kar bekodshim, but not in this case of Zerah B'Shela. The tam is not ki kar, which we don't. Tam and ikar are terms. I don't. Maybe someone will define them. Maybe even before I jump in, what are tam and ikar? It's anybody? Lexi?
An essence.
Essence. I missed the first part you said.
Flavor and essence, or like the essential. I mean, similar.
I'll go with that. Yeah, that's flavor and essence. And the implication then of Rava's statement is,
I would say flavor and substance.
Substance, even better.
Yeah,
substance.
Substance. Who's giving share here?
Sorry.
No, good.
When you take the thing out, you take the Easter out, you still have time.
Good.
The ikar is the substance.
Good.
Substance is too fancy word.
So
design, the thing itself, right?
So whether or not it has to be ba'ayin or not was going to be another question, but let's say, yeah, it's something that's mamash and ikar might be the same thing, maybe. So like it has an actual substance to it. And according to then Rava, who says in Kodshim that tam is ki ikar, right? What's the rule for Hullin, right? That's our big question that's going to come out here. So with that, I want to jump into the Rashi. I'll read. So starting with this is, I think, in the Rashi Latam Kikar, if you go down, I don't know, 4 or 5 lines, Virava late Tam Kikar Behulin. Does everyone see that? Give me some thumbs up here. This is
where say it again. Where are we looking for?
It's the Rashi Dibur Machil Latam Kikar. If you go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines, and the third word on that line, for most printings at least, hopefully, Virava late Tam Kikar.
Behulin.
Yeah, Behulin, it's the important part. So Virava, Lele Tam Kikar Behulin, Kinim Faresh Ve'azil, Midiaraita Beruva Batil, right? Elami de Ravanan, that it's Asur. All right. So it's according to Rava, according to the way Rashi's understanding him, that in Hullin, right, there's no Tam Kikar Midiaraita. That Diaraita, it's about Rov, right? It doesn't matter if you can taste it, right? If it's not there, right? Presumably per the Rashi, if you drop a piece of pork in your soup, right? And you can still see the piece of pork, that's not batil, right? But once you remove that piece of pork and all there is left is tam, but the tam isn't the rov, that's batil. That's batel. And therefore it's mutar. All right. But derabanan, it's asur. And so we have the statement of Avodah Zarah that Rabbi Yochanan says you don't get lashes if you just taste the ta'am of an isur and not the actual mamash part of it, which the way he's understanding not getting lashes here is that therefore it's not deoraita, right? So the whole question is going to hang over us is like, does every Isur Deoraita actually get lashes or not? Are there cases where there are not, right? We'll see maybe, for instance, in the Tosfot, maybe it's just, it's not even an Isur. Maybe
okay, I'm trying to mute myself. I'll do more muting in a moment.
Good. Okay.
But generally, it's just important to say that generally, when we see that there's an Isur has been done and there's no Malkot, right? We generally assume that's a sign that it's not Deoraita, it's Rabbanan. And therefore, what you said is we have to find out those exceptions that it is Deoraita. It is Easter Deoraita, but nonetheless, there's no Malkut.
Great. Thank you, Ralph.
The Easter Lab.
But here's Rashi's problem now. This is where he's going to go. Is there actually 2 places in the Gemara, or 2 psukim, that seem to imply Tamo Kemamasho? All right. V'hadi alfinan le b'psachim min nazir umishrat. It should be mishrat danavim, right? So we have one is the question: a nazir can't eat any grape products. And if you like soak grapes in water and you end up with like grape flavored water, right? That's a sur for the Nazir, right? That sounds like tam mokem amashel, right? Because that's not, he's not eating the grapes, he's eating the grape infused water at this point. Okay. That's one. Liten tam ki kar, because that teaches us that the tam is like the substance of it. Sfirlahu amorae batrai, dasmachta be'almahu. So he says, no, that use of that pasuk, that was just an asmachta. That wasn't actually like a real deoraita derivation. All right. The lav melafu, the lav melafu is not an actual, a real derivation of a deoraita. Dehavuluhu, why? Nazir vigule ovdei kochavim, shtei ktuvim habaim keachad, right? Because we have a second pasuk about after the war with Midian that we have to go kasher all our dishes, all the dish, not our dishes, their dishes that we've now taken over, right? And what's the reason we have to kasher dishes? Because the dishes have tam in them, and therefore tam is kikar. But we have a rule that when you have two different pasukim that have the same principle that they're teaching us, then those two must be exceptional. And because otherwise, why do you need two pasukim? You just have one pasuk, right? We could learn that you have to kash your dishes from Midian if I just had the Mishrat Anavim, or if I just had that I have to boil the Midianite pots, then I don't need the Mishrat Anavim pasuk. So it's shtei ktuvim ba'im ke'echad, and therefore it's not actually a general principle. Inami, alternatively, Gule ovdei kochavim chidushu, that one is a chidush, kidamrin and hatam, because we actually have that in the Gemara. Mishrat leheter mitzaref l'isur, and the Mishrat Anavim, that pasuk isn't coming to teach us the tam ki kar, but rather this idea that if I eat a half zait of isur, but it's combined with a heter, then I've eaten a full amount of food, and therefore I've eaten an isur, and I get lashes for it. Okay, we're not going to worry too much about those two principles there, but just Rashi's proof that we do derive from those psukim, but not what you think we derive. Is his take on that? Okay, that's the Rashi. But the main takeaway I want everyone to have is, well, I'll ask, what is Rashi, according to Rashi, bitul b'shishim or bitul b'mea is deoraita in Hullin, is deoraita or derabanan? What's his takeaway? Somebody, anybody?
At least according to Rava, it's derabanan.
Great, according to Rava, it is the Rabbanan. And I'm pretty sure that this is not when it was Ya'el Kagam, as those are the 6 cases where Abaye beats Rava. So this is not one of them. We would generally paskin like Rava. So it sounds like to Rashi that Tam Ki Kar which is Tam Tikar, number one, Tam Ki Kar leads us to the idea of that you need some sort of bitul, some great number. And that is only a derabanan and not actually a deraita rule. Okay, so we'll jump to the Tosfot here. Any questions so far? Okay. Either I made no sense or I made perfect sense. I'm not sure.
Why did you skip the first part of the Rashi? Because there he seems to imply quite the opposite.
You think he implies that that Tam Kikar is Asur Deoraita, he thinks there?
That's only in Kudshim.
Yeah, in Kudshim.
Right, only in Kudshim.
In Kudshim.
In Kudshim, but not in Hullin. We're talking about Hullin now. So
no, but he also says, Aval Hullin Shaper Gamrinan Minei Lemei V'Shishin. What is that? What does Mei V'Shishi mean? Mei V'Shishi means, well, it could mean Tam Kikar.
Yeah, but
Shishim is when you have Tam, and then it's Usser. Why? Because it's Iker.
No, but he was saying that like the whole Rava point is that Tam Ikar is generally applicable in like in Kodshim, and here it's not. Like in here it's whatever.
But he says Shapir Gamrinan.
And that's why it's a Chiddush to other Kodshim.
Yes, but he says about Hullin Shapir Gamrinan.
Yeah.
Right. But because it's a Chiddush amongst Hullin. But like because with Hullin in general, he would say Tam K'ikar. If you think Tam K'ikar is not the case in Hullin Stam, just like it isn't in the Zra B'Shela, then you can learn the ratios from there.
A brief comment on the relation of Kodshim and Hullin. Mm-hmm. Why is one way and one's the other way? like Kachim is more susceptible, right? Because we have a greater level, it's obvious, but I think it just needs to be said, a greater level of desire of Kachim should be complete. While Hullin, we could be rougher.
Yeah, it's I have some, for the moment, Rav Nachum, if you don't mind, with permission, I'm going to put it aside because the Tosfot is going to, right now I want to focus on the Tosfot and make the argument that Rashi does think it's the Rabbanan, but I take the comment and I have thoughts about it, but it's, I think, a longer discussion. So we'll let it hang for the moment. If
Rav Nachum accepts.
He does.
We're both going on, we're both being quiet. Okay.
So, all right, so we're going to jump to the Tosfot. Rava Amar lo nitzarcha el latam kikar de bekodshim asur. So I'm just going to give just an outline of this Tosfot very quickly. Is they're going to say Rashi thinks it's derabanan, the bitul b'shishim, and we think it's deraita, and then we're going to bring a bunch of sugyot which seem to go against to prove our point, and then a bunch of sugyot that seem to disprove our point, and we're going to rebut all those the sugyot that disprove our point. It's a very typical Tosfot in some ways, and what usually whenever I see a long Tosfot, I'm not such an expert, but whenever I've seen a long Tosfot, most of the time it's just dealing with all the points that don't seem to fit in with their idea, and to try and to save themselves from it. So here we go. We'll jump in. Rava Amar lo nitzracha el latam kikar de bekodshim asur. This is on Sarichet Amud Bet. It's the last Tosfot on the Amud. All right. Piresh bekontros, the zehu limute shar kodshim, right? The zehu, right, in that breita is to exclude all the other kodshim, right? That the zehu, the zroa b'shela is the only case where tam ki kar is mutar, or the tam is mutar, and not like the ikar, in other words. Ava chulin shapri yalfina mine lemea v'shishim demea doraita batle berov. This is actually the point that Rav Nachum was pointing out to us, that Rashi says, yeah, Deoraita, it should have been Rov, but we learn from here, from the Zroa B'Shela, that we should be Machmir about it. You're going to see what being Machmir means here. It could mean that we're Machmir Deoraita, but I think it means Machmir Derabanan, that we only allow Bitul in 100 or 60. All right. So, Mashma de Rotzelamar de Tam Ki Kar de Kamar, Lav Latam Gamorhu de Habatil, B'Meavishim, Elatam Kol dehu Kamar. All right. And this is, I think, one of the most difficult, for me at least, lines in the Tosfot here, but I'll try to play this out. That what is Rashi trying to say? That when we're talking about Tam Ki Kar here, that can be Batel b'Shishim or Mea, we're not talking about real Tam, right? I think he means, one way I'm thinking of this is that you can actually taste it, right? He's not talking about, I have food, I give it to a non-Jew, which we're going to get to that sugya probably next week, a few weeks, whatever it is, and they taste the food, and they're like, oh, it does taste like you dropped some pork in your chicken soup, right? Rather, it's tam koldehu. It's like mashahu. I think he means here that you can't, there's no feeling of it. You can't tell that it's actually there, right? There, Rashi says it's batel b'shishim or b'mea dirabanan. All right. And the reason I think that is there's a Rashi on Sarichet Amud Aleph that got mentioned before, where Rashi actually says to us, I won't look at it inside, that the whole idea of being batel b'shishim is only when you can't taste it anymore, or when you just have no ability to taste it, like min b'mino potentially. So, okay. And I'll let people think, they may disagree with my reading of this here, which I completely accept because I'm not 100% sure about this. But Vigam Sarich Lamar, and back in the Tosfot, Vigam Sarich Lamar, Debachai Gavne Asur Bekodshim, right? So we need to say this is also Asur and Kodshim, right? Ve'afal Gavdol Have Elamashu. All right, and even though there's nothing there really, nonetheless, it's asur if it's 1 in 59, let's say, or 1 in 40 or so forth. Okay, because the tam that's there, even though it's tam koldehu, it's not tam that you can feel, right? Nonetheless, it's asur. All right. Hainu delishtaru af bishar kochim. So when the Gemara says, so in the discussion of Rava's interpretation of this, that we should learn from the Zerah B'Sheila, right? What it means is we should learn that all kochim are mutar in 60 or 100 kizra b'shela, right? And so the Tosfot are now saying, they say v'hashta tema, but this is surprising. Kivan dahachalo ari betam gamor ela b'choldehu, right? But now, if as Tosfot is claiming to have proved that we're talking about, that Rashi is talking about a case where it's not real tam, it's tam kol dehu, right? It's kol shehu. Midecha kol faresh derava itle tam kikar b'chulin lav dioraita, right? So why does Rashi then who's pushing Rashi? Kikar and chulin is not dioraita, right? Kevan dahachalo ari betam gamor. Right? Because here we're dealing not with real Tom, but Tom Koldehu, as I explained. In other words, I think what the Tosfot is saying, it's like, wait a second, Rashi, if you just said that this is about Tom Kolshehu and not Tom that you can actually feel, then you can say that Tom Kikar is Deraita and Tom Gamor. Why did you have to say that Tom Kikar is not Deraita at all? Say that Tam Kikar is not Dioraita, it's Derabanan in Kol Shehu, but in Tam Gamor, it is Dioraita. So this is their pushback in Rashi. Like, why do you have to try so hard, Rashi? The easier step is to say it's Dioraita. All right, so just to summarize here up until now, right, the Tosfot is saying that Rashi, you tried to claim that in Chulin it's Derabanan, but clearly our Gemara is only talking about a case of Kol Dehu, and not Gamor. And so just say that the case of Kol Dehu and Ta'am, that's Dirabanan, that it's Batel B'Shishim or B'Mea. But in terms of when you can actually feel the Ta'am, right, Ta'am Gamor, that needs 60 or 100 in order to be Batel, even in Hulin Deoraita. Okay.
Is this sneaky? It's a question.
Yeah.
Tosfos introduces Tam Kol Shehu.
Yeah.
And then later on says, we have this concept of Tam Kol Shehu. Rashi, how come you didn't use it?
Exactly. Yeah. I think this is Tosfot is being very sneaky here. They create a new concept, and they're like, Rashi, why didn't you use this concept? And by the way, I looked this up. I was like, Tam Gamor. I was like trying to figure out if that shows up anywhere in the Gemara. As far as I can tell, it doesn't. Right? The Tosfot have invented this category.
Wow. That's
I
great.
Might be mistaken. Yavni, please.
I just want to check. I'm not totally following, but are they just saying, making it up and saying, why didn't you use this? Or are they saying the only way to understand Rashi is that he has to be using this concept of Tam Koldu, and then like, shouldn't he be using it in this other way if he's using it? Is that?
Yeah, I think, yes, exactly. Yeah. That's what makes the beginning of this Tosfot so confusing to me. So, but again, I'm not 100% set on my understanding of the Tosfot at this point. This is like a hard Tosfot, partially because they make up a concept. And Rav Nachum, please go for it.
What's bothering Rashi is what I think is that how does Rava explain that it's a humra to say 60, because he sort of says two opposite things. And it's like you were saying before. He says Tam Kicker is Deraita. So if Tam Kicker is Deraita, then that is 60. So how can he say that 60 is a chumrah? 60 is the actual din. That's the din. So how are we learning 60 from this case if Tam Kicker is Deraita? So he's saying what Rashi must be saying is the difference between Tam Kicker and 60. If there's 60, we know for sure that the Tam is Batel. So what the heck is Tam Ki'ikr left to be? It must be some kind of thing that's even beyond. It's some tiny little thing. And that's why he comes to this concept of Tam Koldehu in Rashi. And I think he's correct, because Rashi is saying there is Tam Ki'ikr, but 60 is a chumrah on top of that. It's still a chumrah, and that's why we can learn it. It's a chumrah on top of that. So what is Tam Ki'ikr regarding the Rashi? It must be even less than 60. and then that's how he comes to that definition. Because again, we can't learn from Zorah B'Sheila unless we're learning a chumrah. So it must be a chumrah on top of Tam Ki Ikar. Therefore, Tam Ki Ikar must be, and that's what Tosfos says. He says because he says Daha Batil B'Meya B'Shishim. In other words, the tam is already Batil B'Meya B'Shishim. So what is it? It must be a tiny thing.
Yeah. No, if I can try to summarize that, and maybe I'll see if I get it right, is the Rashi, because Rashi seems to think that Tam Kikar is Deraita and it's Derabanan at the same time, he must think there's two different types of Tam Kikar going on here, right? One is Tam Gamur, and one is Tam Koldahu. And he thinks Tam Koldahu, that's Batel. Tosfot's like, that's what you're saying is Derabanan. And Tam Gamur, you agree that is Deraita. Actually needs to be really batil and it's not berov. So somewhat,
somewhat correct, but it's all deraita. Yeah. There's three deraitas according to Rashi. There's rov, which is then there's tam ke'ikr, and then there's this new thing that we're learning today, which is shishim, and that's a chumrah on chumrah on top of tam ke'ikr.
Yeah. So, but good. Okay. All right.
But it's still a sneaky attack by Tosfos. That's what I have to say.
It is. So, but
sorry, but just to go back. So then, when Rashi says "V'Rava lesle tam ki ikar bechulin,"
right?
So, what does that mean then? He doesn't have it midoraita
in koldahu. Yeah, in tam koldahu, he doesn't have tam ki ikar.
According to Tosfos,
because he applies shishim.
Exactly. But Rashi on his own, I don't think learned like his grandfather.
Yeah, no. I think the Tosfot is forcing the matter on Rashi here for sure. And we can ask why. What is it that's driving Tosfot?
Well, I mean, he says the habatel b'mea v'shishim.
So yeah. So according to Rava, you're right. Exactly what it says. So, but. I think you have to say though, I think that this is a nice, because Rashi doesn't think that if you can taste a tam that it's batel b'shishim, right? He says that explicitly in another Rashi, right? So you have to say that he's talking about a case where you can't taste it, and that's tam koldahu, right? And that's maybe the only case where, according to Rava, is derabanan, right? But the Tosfot's going to jump on this koldahu issue, and this is their next problem with the Rashi here, is because they say we can't be talking about kol shehu in this gemara here, right? And so I'm going to come back in the Tosfot, right? It's ve'od tema, right? It's another questionable thing here.
Where are you right now?
Oh, good. I'm in the Tosfot. I don't know how many lines down. I'm 2 lines up from the widest lines in the Tosfot, if that helps.
Yes, it helps.
So in the middle of the line, ve'od tema, right? Here's another shocking thing about Rashi. Dial korchech ein koldahu oser bekodshim. Right? But wait a second. We don't have we know there's kol shehu isn't asur in kochim. If it's like 1 in a million, right? Or let's say 1 in 1,000 in kochim, that's not asur, right? Why? How does Tosfot know that? Telo asar b'mashehu ela olim davka l'Rabbanan umi milo l'Rabbi Yehuda kedamrina behedya bekometz Rabba. Because if you, unlike me, actually go and learn menachot, the Perek HaKometz Rabbah, you'll know that there's a debate between Rabbanan and Rabbi Yehuda that there's something that's asur b'mashehu in kochim. The Rabbanan think it's things that go on the mizbeach, and Rabbi Yehuda thinks it's just anything that's min b'mino. But those are the only cases. And everything else in kochim, right?
Because only, just think about what it is. Only on mizbeach, it's the highest level of kedusha. If it's the highest level of kedusha, we don't want any contagion. But that's exceptional.
But good, thank you, Rav Landes. I appreciate that. That's and the Rebbe Yehuda, which we will see throughout, is this idea that min b'mino, which could just be simply, I don't know. I was talking to Shani Rosenbaum about this recently. I think maybe min b'mino, according to Rebbe Yehuda, is just you can never know if it's batel. It's the same thing, right? At the end of the day, and we have a pasuk too, right, from the Yom Kippur, the Kohen Gadol that Lexi read before. That helps prove that. But I think the idea is that tam isn't even like applicable at that point. So Yavni, you're looking at me like I'm crazy. No? Okay, I might be crazy, but Yavni is all right. So good. beperik. I'm back in the Tosfot. This is the first wide lines in the Tosfot. The middle. V'chein beperik Tarovot. Amar Rish Lakish hapigul ve'anotar ve'atamesh blalan ze bazeh ve'ochlan patur. But ve'kamar shmamina notentam berov lav deoraita. All right. So this is a case. Rish Lakish brings up a case in Zvachim where if you have three things that are asur and you mix them together and you eat all of them, right? That each isur is batel by the two of the other, essentially, right? This is like a really clever case here. So I guess if you wanted to eat these three, yeah, and maybe lechatchila you can't do it, but you're patur, you're patur of al asur. But that sounds like that here. It's not just b'mashu, it's birov, right? There is bitul and kodshim, right? Because pigul, notar, and tameh are all cases of kodshim, right? That were either offered outside their time or with the intention outside their time, or they were left over, or they were tameh, all right? And nonetheless, you haven't committed an isur by eating them together, all right? So notentam birov lav deraita. All right, and that's proof that even right, this is all b'mino, all things that are the same, right? That if it's even if it's enough that it would give tam, right? If it weren't the same thing, nonetheless in kodshim it would be it would not be asur, all right? And therefore this is Tosfot. All that just in case you want to go back and see it again. This is Tosfot's proof that our whole case can't be talking about Tom Kolshim.
Sorry, can I just go back to the previous case Tosfos cites in Menachot Chafbet?
Yeah.
Because I don't know what they're talking about. Lo asar b'mashu ela olin daparonan. Like,
yeah, there's
not osir b'mashu. I mean, it's not mashu at all. It's where there's water mixed with blood, and it's not. You can still see the blood in it, and there was no case there where it was mashus. That was very strange.
Well, it is about residue, correct?
Yeah.
So, since the focus is on these two items, which have their own gestalts, each one, something that's left over is he's using as a mashu.
It was where. Is another substance, either water or wine. And the point is, as long as you could still see the color of the blood, or if it were that amount in water, you could still see the color of the blood, then the blood is not mibutal, and it's kosher. So that's not a mashu.
Exactly, but it's allowing. It's saying that you're saying, and if it would be less than that, then it would be mutter. So you're saying it's not asur mashu.
Yeah.
I don't remember the case right now. So I did look at it very briefly, but it was it's a great question. Let's put it aside for the moment though, just because right now.
I mean, just we have to redefine what mashu is. Not a tiny amount. It's just not a kamor.
I think it is mashu there, if I remember correctly, though. Actually, it is the way we've been defining it. So I will take that upon myself to relook at. I'll send an email, or maybe somebody else will look at that sugya menachot. All right, but then the Tosfot has now also proven that even b'mino, right, in kodshim, it's that it's batel barov, right? And of course, why do they need to prove that even b'mino? Because uzroa b'shela v'chatat d'shma'itin b'mino askinan, right? Because we're dealing with a mino case, right? The uzroa b'shela. All right, so this is proof that is in kodshim is batel barov. All right. And therefore, we must be talking about tam gamur and not tam mashu. All right. Ve'od. So the Tosfot is going. This is the third wide line. Ve'od amar be'akometz rabba shtei menachot shenikmetzu v'nitarvu debatel berov l'rabanan de'amri min b'no batel alma ein kol dehu oser bekodshim. Right. And there's another case when you have two menachot, two grain offerings, and the Kohen takes them with his hand, and those two get mixed up with each other. That according to the Rabbanan, not Rabbi Yehuda, who doesn't, right, because it's min b'mino, he says that is batil, and therefore, once again, we can't be talking about a kol shehu case in any of these kodshim, because kol shu b'kodshim is an obvious case that is batel. So therefore, again, our gemara is talking about a tam gamur case, and therefore Rashi's wrong. That's the entire logic of the Tosfot here. Good. And Rosh Tosfot ends with, of course, vechen bechama duchtin, and in lots of places, right? This isn't it. This argument goes on. This Tosfot's very long, and therefore we're not going to list all of them for you at this point. So, okay. All right, and so therefore we have to say that our case is talking about a tam gamor case, like I said, that it's asur b'kodshim. And why do we get it? We have a pasuk from the Chatat. And I'm blanking right now. That's the Chatat HaKippurim, right? That from the blood, and therefore that's where we learn that it's the bekochim that tam gamur is asur. All right, v'hu adin de bechulin asur mikra de mishrat anavim. Right, and that's also the case in Hullin. We have another pasuk that Rashi himself quoted and tried to reject. That for the Nazir, when you soak grapes in water, it's asur from the Nazir. That's proof again that tam gamur is asur deoraita in Hullin. All right, and Tosfot goes on. So why are we talking about kodshim here with Rava? El nakat kodshim mishum de v'zro b'shela dehave kodshim kai. All right, v'hachashare. But why? Because we're talking about a kodshim case. That's the only reason that when Rava said kodshim, he meant Hullin also, right? He just happens to be talking about, we're on the case of kodshim, so he talked about kodshim. So Rav Landes, you look like you wanted to say something to me. No, okay. Oh, Rav Landes, you're on mute, I think.
No, I'm just astonished by, that's kind of a slippery thing. I know this whole Tosfot seems to me partially a scam. We're talking only by kodshim. We're not talking. We are actually, we mean Hullin also, maybe.
Yeah, Rav Nachum once said to us. He said, the best part of the Tosfot is the problems they raise more than their answers sometimes. And I think this is an amazing Tosfot in seeing how there's many different gemaras that seem to all have different opinions on whether or not, or push different ways as to whether or not tam kikar is deoraita or derabanan. And the Tosfot essentially chooses a side and then tries to reject everything against it, while Rashi himself chooses a side and tries to reject everything again, or reject a few things against it at least. It's not Rashi's style to do all of them. So
also their answer about like what it means for tam kikar to not be an issue with the Zera B'Shela is like a smart one that I think kind of gets at what Yavni had an issue with earlier, where they're like, well, yes, you might have thought the Gemara was talking about like a tam mashu because, as we just said, this Zera B'Shela is either a 60 or 100 case. But no, actually, sometimes part of it's in the sauce and part of it's not in the sauce. There'd be a smaller ratio, and we still don't say it's forbidden, which is like a very specific and clever answer.
Actually, since I've been talking a lot, you want to read that? That's the next part in the Tosfot. You want to read that? V'hachashare.
Right, Elanaka Kochim, Mishim Divzra Bashela, the Have Kochim Kai, the Hachashare, the Hamim Shazra, Mikzat Min Ha'al, Hayuchutz the Rotev, Benoten Hazra Tam, Bemashachutz, Bezimnin, Nami Shiesh Me, Shamnunit Hazra, Harbe, Al Ota Mikzat, Ajloya Herov, Baota Mikzat, the Batlo, Bukholinyan, Shivashel, Hitira Katuv. Right, so we mentioned Kochim because it's the Zroa. And you cook it and the rest of the ale is still permitted. And when it's being cooked, there are times where like the zroa will be outside of the sauce along with a small part of the rest of the ram. And it'll give flavor to the rest of that bit that's outside of the sauce. Or like it'll be very fatty, et cetera, et cetera. And basically there wouldn't even be a rove necessarily in the bit that it's giving flavor to, and nonetheless the pasuk says that flavor does not make the rest of the meat asur.
Exactly. So okay, good. I'm going to pause here. Just any questions so far? Any thoughts? Any people get this far in the Tosfot? Is that okay? This is, by the way, this Tosfot is a heavy Tosfot compared to most that we'll see some heavy Tosfots, but this is, I think, one of the heaviest. So if you're like, wow, following all these arguments is like crazy, don't worry. you can do it. So that's my all right. So with that, so we're back. I'm going to take back over here. Rava lo paliga Rabbi Yochanan de mishrat ata latam kikar. All right, and Rava agrees with Rabbi Yochanan about in the Mishrat Anavim sugya that pasuk comes to teach us that tam is like the ikar, that the taste of something is like its essence and therefore needs bitul. Udrasha gemurahi. This is a real drasha. It's not an asmachta, velo asmachta. All right, and so in other words, it's deoraita. Demi Rabbi Akiva nishma l'Rabbanan, de darish la leheter mitzaref lisur delaki. All right, v'odin de l'Rabbanan demoki la latam ki kar nami laki. All right, so right, Rabbi Akiva reads that pasuk actually as the whole thing, as Rashi mentioned, that an isur and heter combine to make up a full amount of food, but nonetheless you get lashes for it. And the rabbis think that they read that pasuk as tam ki kar, and you get lashes. And since you get lashes, it must be a deoraita law. That tam ki ikar. So you eat the tam of a non-kosher thing and you can taste it. That is a punishable offense, a deoraita punishable offense.
You just mentioned that. That's a very interesting cloud, because we're talking about basically there's not enough shiur in the isur to make its impact. So that there are cases in which we want to say that the shiur of the heter is mashlim the shiur of the isur. And this itself is a shas machlokas in all the Rishonim, and will come, but it's very different from our normal principle. That's why they kind of bring it here. That's kind of an outlier principle in terms of how things work, I think.
But yeah, it's a very, I struggle with it. So that's good. I'm glad to hear that. It's and so up until here, this is essentially, I'd say, part one of the Tosfot, in like they have claimed to have proven their case. And from here, they're going to go to cases that seem to disagree with their case and try to push them back, right? This is a very typical, as I said, Tosfot structure here. I know I'm not teaching a Gemara class here, but so now we're going to get a case that I think we're going to see this in Shir in a few weeks as well. V'hadi amar Abaye beperak kol basar. So the next parak in Hullin, Shma mina tamo v'lo mamasho be'alma de'araita. De'ider Rabbanan mi basar b'chalav my time lo garminan lahu techidushu. All right. So I'll explain the case here. This is the case, I believe it's when you drop a little bit of milk on some piece of meat in the Mishnah, right? And the Mishnah says if you can taste it, it's asur. And so in basar b'chalav, it sounds like ta'am is keikar in that case. And Rava, essentially the whole question is, well, why is it? I think it's Abaye there. I can't remember who it is. That they try to use this as proof that maybe that if that's the case for basar b'chalav, we should have proved that for everything else. And they're like, no, we can't, because basar b'chalav is a chidush, which Rashi there says it's a chidush because you have a mixture of two things that becomes two permissible things that becomes an isur, so it's an unusual, it's a sui generis case. Because usually mixtures of things, by the way, are not batel at all. Is the general rule. Like for instance, shatnez is a great example. This is why, right, people go crazy about making sure to check there's no threads of linen in your wool, is because there is no bitul in things like that. Normally in kilayim there is in there is in basar b'chalav, and we say because the chiddush we can't derive from it, and therefore it sounds actually as if that maybe that in every other case it's actually derabanan. Ichidushu afagav delekanoten tam nami. Right, and so the Gemara suggests there. It says, well, wait a second. If basar b'chalav is a chidush, then you don't need noten tam. It should just be never be batel. Amar lecha Rava derech bishul asrat Torah. right? And Rava responds, he says, no, for basar b'chalav, it has to be bishul. Bishul means it actually has to have flavor to it, essentially, right? Which sounds that Rava is saying he actually thinks that everything else but basar b'chalav is derabanan, right? This is and Tosfos says it's perush le'olam derabanan, right? And therefore, everything else is derabanan, the bitul b'shishim. And so what does Tosfot say about that? That sounds like against their case. Hatam dichui be'almahu, right? No, he's just pushing off the case. In other words, it's part of the flow of the sugya, right? Klomar me'acha lo tidok, right? Don't read carefully there. In other words, Rava is just answering the question of the Gemara. He's not actually trying to make a halachic claim in that sugya. That's Tosfot's argument there. You see this sometimes. It's quite a claim, right? That's the shakla v'tarya. That's not actually a halachic statement. So, all right. So that's case one that Tosfot pushes away, right? That seems to challenge them. Uveperik batcher de masechet avodah zara de amar Rabbi Yochanan tamov lo masho asur ve'en lo kin alav, right? This is the case that Rashi brought up. That right, that when you have the tam and not the mamash, it's asur, but you don't get lashes, therefore it's asur de rabbanan. We would say, all right. Hainu b'mino. The midoraita beruva batil. No, that case that Rabbi Yochanan is talking about there, that's only min b'mino, right? And min b'mino, we agree, is doraita beruva, right? We see the split all of a sudden happen here, that min b'mino doraita is beruv, or in Tosfot, min b'mino, min b'she'eno mino, though, midoraita is b'shishim, or b'mea, potentially, but they haven't clarified that yet. But so that's how he pushes off the Rabbi Yochanan issue, how the Tosfot push off how they push it off. All right. V'tamo masho de kamar hatam delokin kigon she'isur ba'ayin umakiro. And what are the cases where? And it says if it's tam, and that sugya says if it's tamo and mamasho, right, that you get lashes for it. That's when you can see the isur, right, and you recognize it. Because if mim b'mino now is batel barov dioraita, then why would you get lashes if it's tamo mamasho if it's batel barov? No, because even if it's batel barov, if you can see the piece of isur and you don't get rid of it, you can recognize it. That then you still get lashes. It's still asur deraita. All right. V'chikatani tamo v'lo mamasho, and when it teaches us tamo v'lo mamasho asur ve'en lo kin alav hu adin afilo tamo umamasho, and they say, well, wait a second, if you eat min b'mino, where it's mamasho and tamo, which is batel barov, that sounds like diaraita, you also shouldn't get lashes. It's only asur d'Rabbanan, you shouldn't get lashes. So why did Rabbi Yochanan only say tamo v'lo mamasho, right? No, he meant also tamo mamasho im en makiro ela milta b'sika nakat bechol inyan, right? He was just giving us, I'm not really sure maybe someone can help me here how to translate this, like a general law or something like that. I'm not sure how to milta psika.
Which term?
Milta de psika. Yeah. He wants to give us bechol inyan.
Well, it could be in some contexts. It's something of a specific psak, which is not that universalized.
Yeah. Okay.
Making like a general statement.
Thank you. Yeah, that works for me too. Yeah,
not a clear-cut case.
There we go. Yes. Yeah, he wanted something. Yeah. There's no question, right? Because there's a case where tamo mamasho, when it is be'ayin, it is lokin alav. He wanted to give you a case where there's no question about it. So that's I like that. Okay. All right. Inami, second thing, because he's really bothered by this Rabbi Yochanan case. Nakat velo mamasho l'ravuta de afilo hachi asur. Right. This is just Rabbi Yochanan's giving you the extreme case that even if there's no mamash, nonetheless, even though you don't get lashes, it's still asur. And so he's giving you the extreme case, right? So just in case you were, like a little bit lost about that. So far we've had a pushback to the Tosfot on the basar b'chalav case, sounding like that non-basar b'chalav cases are not the oraita, the tamo kamamasho, and they said no. That case of Rava where he seemed to imply that was just the flow of the sugya, and he was just answering a question that wasn't really halacha. And the case of Rabbi Yochanan, they're saying that tamo mamasho, he's talking about min b'mino, and that is batel barov. All right, that's where we're sitting so far, and I'm at 3:58, so I should probably end soon. See if I can get us two more lines here. Ve'od yeshlamar. So I'm on Tzadi Tet Amud Aleph. Ve'od yeshlamar. Dehatam ire b'shelo b'mino vehecha deika kezayit b'chtei achilat pras karile tamo mamasho. All right. And so, and the other possibility is that whole case of the Rabbi Yochanan, where we said that tamo b'mamasho, that you do get lashes for it. We are talking about min b'mino, but what's the issue? Is even though it's batel, right? If you eat enough of it that it's kazait, an alsworth in the amount of time it would take to eat achilat pras, like 3 to 9 minutes, depending on who you ask, right? To eat a meal, essentially, that would be called tamo mamasho. All right. There were really just, it's a question of how much isur you're eating in a certain amount of time. And it is she'eno mino, but we're talking about really, this is actually a really important principle, I think, that even if, maybe you can't taste the tam, maybe there's not a lot of it, maybe it's batel barov, whatever it may be, if you eat, if nonetheless, let's say take the batel barov case, right? If and you would have eaten a kazait of isur in a short amount of time, that's still, you're eating isur, right? And therefore that's asur, and you get lashes for it.
Because the short amount of time makes up for the ratio.
Exactly. Yeah. So, okay. And that's Tosfot. There's some more cases that they bring, but I think it's a good stopping point. Maybe Rav Landes, do you think? I
think it's a great stopping point. It's really yeshkach to you, yeshkach to everybody. If I ever took a pedagogy class, I would have learned how to have a lesson plan, but I never took a pedagogy class. But in my imagined pedagogy class, I was going to end by having everyone state a klal that we learned today. And that it would go around 2 or 3 times because there's so many klalim we saw. And that's part of what's happening. From individual cases, they create klalim. The klalim contradict, and there's other cases which either modify the klal or put the klal from a deraita to rabbanan, or a klal from a more specifically high sensitive information, high sensitive like the karnot on mizbeach, or down to kachim, or down to subkachim, or that we go from Isur Gomer to Isur Kolshahu in order to, so therefore the klolim create the sub klolim, and there's a lot of other stuff that we'll do in Yeridea, but it's good to begin the discussion. And Rav Nachum, you want to say something about next week briefly?
Yeah, next week we'll skip actually, I think, a page, and we'll start on page Kuf. And we'll continue in our picking of important sugyas. There's an important tosfos there, Shekidem, B'Shekidem, Daf Kuf Amud Aleph. We'll continue learning next week. These foundational simanim, or not simanim, it's foundational sugyot for our future simanim.
Right. I would say, right, the last point I make, if you just look over the Gemara that we did with Rashi, there's fantastic benefit. You'll see. Okay. But that's a usual Rebbe Musar giving.
We'll say one other thing. You should really read the page between, but we're not going to learn the pages between.
Yeah.
There's a page between where we are now and page Kuf.
Okay.
That's also worth reading.
Okay. All right. Shkayach.
Shkayach.
Everybody. It's a beginning. Okay. Shkayach.
Laila Tov.
Laila Tov, thank you.